Can you imagine standing in a field in South Texas, looking up and watching a low-flying plane open its belly and release a cloud of flies, millions of them, falling like gray snow across the brush country? Not spraying poison, not dropping water, dropping flies, on purpose, paid for by the United States government, 400 million of them since January, and the reason they are doing it is far worse than the flies. It begins with a wound. It does not have to be a large one. A scratch from barbed wire, a tick bite, the soft healing navel of a newborn calf, a cut on a dog's ear, a fly lands. She is not remarkable to look at. Metallic blue-green, about the size of a housefly, orange eyes. She is drawn to the smell of blood, and she does something almost no other fly on earth does. She lays her eggs in living flesh, 200, 300 at a time, packed along the edge of the wound in neat rows. Within a day, they hatch, and what comes out does not eat dead tissue the way ordinary maggots do. It eats the animal. The larvae burrow downward, head first, in a tight screwing motion. That motion is where the name comes from. Screwworm. They feed for about a week. The wound widens instead of closing. It draws more flies, more eggs, hundreds becoming thousands. A cut the width of a fingernail can become a cavity in a matter of days. Ranchers say they smell it before they see it. Cattle standing apart from the herd, refusing to eat. Deer lying down in the brush and not getting up. Untreated, a full-grown cow can die in 1 to 2 weeks. Wound, then eggs, then larvae, then death. That was the cycle. And for the first half of the 20th century, it ran across the entire American South every single summer. Humans fought it the way humans usually fight insects, with chemicals. Ranchers dipped cattle in vats of pesticide. They smeared wounds with coal tar. They hand-treated animals one at a time, in the heat, in the dust, day after day. Big outfits hired men whose entire summer job was riding the pastures looking for open wounds. It never worked. Pesticide killed the larvae in the wound you found. It did nothing about the flies in the next county. A screwworm can travel more than 100 miles in its lifetime. Every pasture you cleaned was reinfested the following season. By the 1950s, screwworm was costing American livestock producers what would today amount to well over $1 billion a year. Wildlife managers watched deer populations crash in the worst summers. There was no chemical answer. There was no fence that would hold it. There was no vaccine. And then 2 government researchers asked a completely different question. Their names were Edward Knipling and Raymond Bushland, and they did not ask how to kill the flies. They asked how the flies make more flies, and they found the weak point. The female New World screwworm mates one time, in her entire life. After that, she is finished. She will go looking for a wound and lay her eggs regardless of whether that single mating produced anything viable at all, which meant you did not have to kill the flies. You only had to waste them. Knipling and Bushland began breeding screwworms by the million, exposing the pupae to gamma radiation, enough to scramble the reproductive cells, not enough to weaken the adult insect, and releasing the sterile males back into the wild. Every sterile male that found a wild female removed her from the population permanently. She would spend her one chance on a partner who could give her nothing. To understand why the answer in 2026 is 400 million flies, you have to go back to the last time Texas fought this and won. In 1954, they tested it on the island of Curacao. The screwworm was gone in a matter of weeks, so they scaled it. Florida, Texas, the Southwest, and in 1966, the United States declared the New World screwworm eradicated from the country. It was the first time in history that human beings had deliberately erased an insect pest from a continent, and they had done it without a single drop of insecticide. The program kept pushing south, country by country, for the next 30 years, until the fly was pinned at the narrowest point in the Americas, the Darien Gap in Panama. A permanent curtain of sterile flies released every week, holding a line barely 100 miles wide. For 60 years, Americans forgot screwworm existed. That was the whole point. Then the line moved. Starting in 2022 and 2023, screwworm turned up north of the barrier, then further north. Country by country, it climbed back up the map it had been pushed down. Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, and then Mexico. Across Central America and Mexico, the outbreak has affected more than 171,700 animals. Roughly 2,000 people have been infected. The CDC has recorded 10 human deaths. Yes, people. The screwworm does not distinguish between a cow's wound and a human one. It never has. The United States closed its southern border to cattle imports. Inspectors went to work at the crossings. Traps went up. Alerts went out. And still, on the 3rd of June, 2026, USDA APHIS confirmed exactly what everyone had been bracing for. A case in Zavala County, Texas. 60 years of work, and the fly was standing on American ground again. And the plan the government announced sounded, to a great many people, like nonsense. Because the response to an invasion of flesh-eating flies was to release hundreds of millions more flies into the same landscape. Ranchers asked the obvious question. You are going to fix a fly problem with flies? What happens if the sterilization misses even a fraction of them? It sounded like pouring gasoline on a wildfire and calling it a fire break. This is the moment the story stops being about insects and starts being about arithmetic. You cannot spray your way out of a screwworm outbreak, but you can outnumber it. And the math runs in your favor in a way almost nothing in pest control ever does. Say a wild population has 10,000 fertile males, release 10,000 sterile ones, and roughly half of all matings are wasted. Release 100,000, and it is closer to 90%. Release 1 million, and a wild female almost certainly never encounters a fertile mate during her one and only opportunity. So the population shrinks. And here is the part that makes the whole strategy work. As the wild population falls, the ratio gets more lopsided, not less. The releases do not get harder as you win. They get easier. Every generation, the trap tightens on its own, which is exactly why the number in the headline is the number it is. You do not release enough flies to compete. You release an absurd, disproportionate, almost comical quantity of flies. Overwhelming the population is not a side effect of the plan. It is the plan. Since January, roughly 400 million sterile flies have been released over Texas. That is more flies than there are people in the entire United States, released onto one state. To understand what 400 million flies actually takes, you have to look at the factory behind them. Most of them begin their lives in Panama, at a facility outside Pecora operated by COPEG, a joint United States and Panamanian operation that exists for one purpose: manufacturing insects. Larvae are raised on a formulated diet in stacked trays. Pupae are irradiated. The adults are chilled into dormancy, packed into boxes, and shipped north. The United States is also putting $21 million into a facility at Matapa in southern Mexico to bring a second production line online closer to the front. Then comes dispersal, and it happens 3 ways. Aircraft fly, measured transect lines, and release chilled flies through a chute, letting them wake up as they fall. Where planes cannot fly, vehicles carry release boxes down ranch roads and section lines. And in some areas, ground chambers hold the flies until conditions are right to let them go. Air, vehicle, and ground, every week. Across an area you could not patrol with 10,000 men. Right now, as you're watching this, another release is being loaded. For ranchers, none of this is abstract. The border closure interrupted a cattle trade that normally moves well over 1 million head a year from Mexico into American feedlots. Prices moved, feeders scrambled, supply chains that had run the same way for decades stopped running, and producers in Texas started doing something their grandfathers did and their fathers never had to: checking every animal, every wound, every day. In Zavala County, the ranchers who found that first case now walk their pastures twice a day. Not because anyone told them to, because the nearest confirmed case was on their own ground. Veterinarians across the state had to be retrained on what to look for, because most practicing vets in America have never seen a screwworm case in their entire careers. There was never any reason to. Estimates of what a re-established screwworm population would cost the United States livestock sector run into the billions of dollars a year before you count the deer, the pets, the wildlife, or the people. Against that, A fly farm and a few aircraft is not an extravagance. It is one of the cheapest insurance policies in American agriculture. And this is not a theory. It is a technique with a track record. Curaçao, 1954, the first field proof, an island cleared in weeks. The United States, 1966, an entire country cleared, and the fly pushed off the map. Mexico and Central America, through the 1980s and the 1990s, driven steadily south, nation by nation, to the Darien. And then something nobody expected. In 1988, Screwworm somehow crossed the Atlantic and established itself in Libya. It was the first time in history it had ever appeared outside the Americas. Livestock losses mounted fast. An international emergency response shipped sterile flies to North Africa and began releasing them over the infested zone. By 1991, it was gone. An infestation on the wrong continent, erased by mathematics. Nippling and Bushland were awarded the World Food Prize in 1992. Neither of them ever built a better trap or invented a stronger poison. They found one number, and they used it. Back in Texas, the release lines continue. Surveillance traps sit in pastures and along highway corridors. Ranchers report suspicious wounds. Sample larvae get shipped to labs for identification because a screwworm and an ordinary blowfly look similar enough to fool almost anyone at a glance. Every confirmed detection triggers a saturation release across the surrounding area. Far more flies than the local population could possibly require dropped for weeks after the last case. Because the goal is not to reduce screwworm in the United States. The goal is zero. And then to push the barrier back south, country by country, all the way to the Darien Gap and hold that line again. That will take years. It will take more facilities, more aircraft, and more flies than have ever been released in the history of this country. For most of the last century, the human answer to an insect problem was a stronger poison. Spray more, spray wider, spray again next season and the season after that. Screwworm broke that logic completely because there was no poison strong enough or wide enough to matter against an insect that could fly 100 miles and find a wound the size of a paper cut. What worked instead was patience and biology. Not a weapon aimed at the insect, a weapon aimed at the insect's arithmetic. One quiet biological fact that a female mates only once in her life turned into a continental strategy that has outlasted every chemical ever sprayed at it. We did not beat the screwworm by being more violent than it. We beat it by being more numerous. So when a plane opens over the Texas brush country and a cloud of flies falls out, understand what you are actually watching. Flies that cannot reproduce, released to make certain that other flies don't. A parasite that killed livestock across the American South every summer for 50 years, held off the map for 60. A wound that used to mean a dead animal and now means a phone call to a veterinarian. Deer that used to vanish from the brush in bad years, still standing in it. The cycle has reversed. Not wound, then eggs, then larvae, then death. But release, then waste, then collapse, then silence. 400 million flies is a strange sentence. It sounds like a mistake, or a disaster, or a joke. It is none of those things. It is the sound of a country remembering how it won this fight once before and paying whatever it costs to win it again.